my name is Kar Hilman. So today we will present about the Asian financial crisis that facing by Indonesia. So today I will introduce about the crisis first. The Asian financial crisis occurred between July 1997 and 98, beginning in Thailand and quickly spreading across East and Southeast Asian countries. And Indonesia was one of the countries most severely affected. The value of the currency, which is rupiah, collapsed, and the inflation skyrocketed, and the entire economy fell into chaos. So this crisis basically exposed deep weaknesses in the economic structures and financial system of many developing countries, including Indonesia. So this study is important because it helps us understand how macroeconomic policy, currency stability, and investor confidence are closely connected. In this presentation, we will explore the causes of the crisis and devastating effects on Indonesia and how the country respond and recovered from one of the worst economy in its history. So we go to the next presenter.
Now I'm gonna talk about the definition and overview of the Asian financial crisis in Indonesia. The Asian financial crisis started in 1997 when Thailand currency and the baht suddenly lost its value. This made investors panic and pull their money out, not just from Thailand but also from other Southern Asian countries. And Indonesia, one of the worst affected. And in Indonesia, the currency rupiah dropped by more than 80%, and this caused price to rise very fast, making basic items very expensive. Many businesses could not survive, which led to the job losses, and people become angry and protest in the street. In 1998, President Suharto stepped down after over 30 years in power to help the International Monetary Fund (IMF) give a bailout loan to Indonesia. However, the condition attached to the loan made recovery slow and painful for the people. Malaysia also faced a similar economic problem, but it did not accept help from the IMF. Instead, Malaysia used capital control and fixed its currency value to the US dollar. This step helped Malaysia recover more quickly than Indonesia. In the end, the crisis taught an important lesson which most countries need a strong financial system, better regulation, and should not rely on much on foreign money sector to avoid future crises. That's all from me. Thank you.
The Asian financial crisis was caused by both global and domestic factors. Globally, Southeast Asia received large amount of short-term capital in the early 1990s, which left country vulnerable. When investor confidence dropped, speculative attacks began, starting with Thailand and quickly spreading to Indonesia. The rupiah collapsed by more than 80%. International investors pulled out their money quickly, worsening the crisis. Although the IMF provided bailout funds, its strict reform caused short-term suffering and led to protests in Indonesia. Domestically, Indonesia had a weak financial system. Banks gave risk loans based on political ties, crown regimes, and many businesses had large debts in US dollar. When the currency fell, they could repay. In comparison, Malaysia also faced debt and weak governance but recovered faster by rejecting IMF help and using capital controls. Overall, Indonesia crisis was due to a mix of external shocks, weak regulation, heavy forex debt, and political instability.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Ashraf bin Safian, and now let's take a look how the Asia financial crisis affected Indonesia, both economically and politically. First, the economic impact was massive. One of the most serious issues was the fall in the value of the rupiah. Before the crisis, $1 was equal about 2,600 rupiah, but during the worst point in early 1998, it's a drop nearly 60,800 rupiah. That's more than 500% drop. Because of this, price of basic goods like food and fully skyrocket. In 1998, inflation reached 77%, meaning the most families could no longer afford everyday necessities. At the same time, Indonesia economic crash. If you look at the graph here, you can see that the country GDP shot by the 30.1% in 1998. Many businesses closed down and foreign investors pulled their money. This caused high employment and pushed millions of people into poverty. Now let's talk about the social and political effect. As a people lost jobs and prices keep rising, frustration grow, and this led a massive riot in the May 1998 across many cities, especially Jakarta. The situation became serious that President Suharto was forced to resign after being in power of 32 years. His fall marked the beginning of a new chapter of Indonesia politics known as a reformasi or reform era, where demand better governance and less corruption. In short, the Asia financial crisis deeply affected every part of Indonesia. It's an economy, it's a people, it's a leadership. That's all from me.
Following on the set of the crisis, the International Monetary Fund or IMF stepping in the substantial aid package of 43 billion US dollar, but this assistance come with the strict condition to stabilize the economy. The Indonesia government closed over 16 banks, reducing the subsidy and carry out the structural reform. The key move was the establishment of the National Banking Rehabilitation Agency or BPPN to manage and restructure failing a bank. The rupiah was floating, meaning its value was not longer fixed by the government, allowing the market focus to determine its rate. Lastly, the interim government began implementing both economic and democratic reform, market the start of a major transition period for Indonesia.
From this crisis, Indonesia and the world learned several important lessons. The first is don't rely too much on external debt. When the currency falls, the cost of foreign loans become unbearable. The second thing is strong and transparent financial institutions are critical. Weak banking system and a lack of oversight made the crisis much worse. And the third is the financial crisis must be addressed quickly and decisively. Delays or half-hearted action only increase the damage. And fourth, economic reform must go hand in hand with political stability. Indonesia's recovery began with both the country and the government started to change. And finally, the crisis became a turning point. It ended an era of authoritarian rule and opened the door for Indonesia's modern democracy. Although it was a painful chapter, the crisis saw Indonesia how to build a more resilient and transparent economy for the future.
In the conclusion, the crisis began with the currency attack and a massive capital flight leading to the several economic consequences. Indonesia experienced a major contraction in the GDP, high inflation, and a sharp rise in unemployment. The crisis also brought about the historic political shift with the fall of Suharto Remegi, the new order, and then paving the way of the democratic reform. With the MIF assistance, Indonesia implemented deep structural and institutional reform. Ultimately, this painful chapter became a turning point by teaching Indonesia the importance of resilience, institution, and setting the foundation for the long term. democratic and economic transaction.